What is up, fellas? This is Finch, and welcome back to the Dota Clinic. Today is episode number 9, and we're looking at concentration and focus, two very, very important areas. Also, two very, very complicated areas I learned when I was outlining this episode. It got real technical and a little bit dry and boring, so I tried to edit out as much as I possibly could. So we're going to do 2 parts. Today is going to be the first part, and we're going to be looking at defining concentration and looking at the different types of concentration. In the next episode, which will be next week, we're going to be taking a look at ways to increase your own concentration or your own focus. These are going to be like strategies and mindsets and all that kind of good stuff. And also looking at the things that take away your concentration and your focus and things kind of, I guess the distractors, if you will. So that we're going to be looking at that next week. So today is going to be about getting that solid foundation and kind of understanding what we're talking about when we're talking about concentration. So if you're a person who finds this stuff fascinating, hope you stick around because I find this stuff extremely interesting. And like I said earlier, this topic is hugely complicated. There's tons of different theories and ideas out there. So this is one of those episodes, kind of like the motivational episode, where I tried to boil down the stuff that I thought was somewhat relevant to understanding, the strategies. And, if you want a deeper understanding of those strategies, this stuff's important. But if you find yourself wondering what those other theories are out there, you can look for that information online. You can send me a message on Twitter or something like that, and I can point you in that direction, and we can talk about that if you want, because there is a lot of really different interesting theories, but that's kind of going down a road of cognitive science and less of sports psychology. So to get back on track, let's start with just a quote, real simple, real easy, and this is a good quote because it sums everything up. The quote is from Steve Jobs, and he said, "Focusing is about saying no." And that's it. Real simple, straight to the point. The idea of focusing is being able to tune out the irrelevant information and focus on the most important information. If you look at a dictionary definition for concentration, it says the action or power of focusing one's attention or mental effort. So same thing, you need to focus on the important information and kind of gathering data and all that kind of good stuff, data, information, whatever you want to call it. You're going to be gathering that from whatever you're paying attention to, and then you need to ignore the irrelevant information so you don't get overwhelmed by the details, if you want to call it that. So let's look at the 4 different parts of concentration. What I did here is I broke them down into 4 different bits. All 4 of these things go back into concentration, but they're just kind of sums of the whole part of concentration. So the first one is going to be focusing on relevant cues in the environment. So this is looking at selective attention. Now, selective attention, people call it selective hearing sometimes too. Selective hearing is the idea of you only hear what you want to hear. Selective attention is you want to only see what you want to see, but you need to, obviously you're going to be seeing everything, but you need to decide what parts of the things that you're seeing are actually important. So I put a little example here for Dota. If you see a hero on the minimap go missing, did they go back to base? Are they coming to gank me? Are they just wandering around? What they're doing is going to depend on what you know and what kind of selection your attention makes. So if you know that they had low health, then you can assume, okay, they're probably going back to base, they're getting health, whatever it may be, so you're going to be a little bit safer in your lane and you're just going to be okay and just keep on going. If they leave with full health and they're coming south, say you're in the bottom lane, they're coming south towards you, you need to realize that 1, they're probably coming to gank me, and 2, that's an important piece of information, so I need to get back rather than just pushing forward and going towards the enemy's tower. That is finding a piece of information that is very important, and then you need, to make this as simple as possible, you have to recognize that information is happening, so that's the first step. Next step is going to be recognizing that the thing that's happening is actually important, and then the third thing is recognizing what's important and then processing on what you need to do to that. So that is a really complicated thing where we think it's just, instant. It's just real fast, but that's not how it works. There's a lot more different processing levels that go through. And then meanwhile, you have, somebody last hitting, you're listening to music, you have somebody behind you talking, you're looking at the clock, so you have to go somewhere. All these different things are coming into play where they're causing you to be distracted and they're pulling your focus away when you really need to be focusing on, am I going to die? Is this guy from middle lane coming to kill me? Something that simple of a problem can become really complicated. So we want to try to strip out the information that's not relevant at all, and that way you can pay attention to the things that are relevant. Number 2 is going to be maintaining attentional focus of time. Now, the attentional focus of time is just how long you can maintain that level of, hyper focus, if you want to call it that. So you can be super focused, but can you maintain that for a whole 60-minute game? Or can you only be super, super focused for 10 minutes, and then after that you just start looking around, you don't pay attention, you don't even bother looking at the mini map anymore, all sort of, all these different things cause you to lose your focus and kind of tear you away from what you're trying to do. It is very difficult to maintain a long period of focus. If it was easy, everybody would do it, but it's an extremely difficult thing to do. So there's a lot of different strategies, which we'll talk about next time, on how you can kind of rein yourself in, kind of pull it back, reframe your mind, and get back on track and being focused. Number 3 is going to be having awareness of the situation and performance errors. So this is just basically understanding what is going on around you, and then understanding when those things are good, when those things bad. So if you're looking back up here at the first one, which was selective attention, so you looked at a situation, you said, yes, this situation is important and it is worth my time and my focus. So you began focusing on that situation. Well, now you need to look at, is this a good thing or a bad thing? What kind of data is here? What do I need to do? So an example in Dota is going to be looking at the enemy team coming towards you. You need to assess the situation and say, should we push forward and take the fight, or should we pull back and retreat? This is trying to recognize those variables, right away when they're happening. And the only way you're going to do that is by paying attention and really focusing on kind of the information at hand, things such as mana pools, things such as ability cooldowns. If Tidehunter's coming towards you and his ultimate's on cooldown because he just used it 10 seconds ago, then you might think, we probably could take this fight. But if you haven't seen him use his ultimate in a long time and it's up, well, then maybe you think, okay, let's just pull back because he's probably going to use that. So that is just having that awareness of the situation and knowing when things are going right and when things are going bad. Number 4 is going to be shifting attentional focus away when necessary. This is kind of moving from a big picture point of view into a small detail point of view. So big picture point of view is going to be looking at the mini map, looking at the 5 enemy heroes positioning, looking at your own positioning, and then bringing it down into a more detailed view is going to be looking at something like yourself and the creep you're trying to last hit, or yourself and your lane partner, or yourself and the enemy guy, I guess, that you're opposing in your lane. That is a lot more focused, and you're just looking at your screen. Well, if you're looking at the mini map, you're looking at a global view. This is kind of the same thing where if you think about like football, a quarterback comes back to pass is going to be able to look at the whole field. He needs to recognize which of his players are receivers. So you have all those players out there, only a couple of them are receivers, and then you have to narrow down which of those receivers are actually open, and then pick one and then try to make a good pass to that receiver. You're trying to focus your attention from looking at the whole field to analyzing where the 4 receivers are, and then very detailed to where that one receiver is you're trying to hit. Kind of that same thing carries over to Dota, especially like a team fight. You have 4 or 5 heroes in a team fight. Well, yes, you could just use your abilities and try to hit all of them, but you're going to be more efficient if you try to focus on one of them and be a little more detailed and shift your focus from, okay, I'm aware of everybody, but I'm really going to focus on killing Crystal Maiden. But I'm going to pay attention to where Enigma's at, I'm going to pay attention to where Bristleback's at, but I'm going to try to kill Crystal Maiden. That is kind of that shifting from global focus to not so global focus. Another big one is when to focus on your hero and when to focus on the shop. So a lot of times people will be new to Dota and they haven't quite understood how to use all the hotkeys and stuff for the courier and how to use the quick buy and all that kind of stuff. So they'll be in their lane trying to last hit, doing the best they can, not dying because they don't want to get yelled at. And then all of a sudden they need to buy something. Well, then they look back at the shop and they are looking for the item. They can't find it. Well, meanwhile, the enemy creeps are hitting them or the enemy hero is hitting them. That is an unnecessary time to shift their focus away because they didn't decide, okay, I'm safe with my hero. I can then shift my focus to the shop. So then you got to implement things such as, I'm going to go in the trees, or I'm going to go under my tower, or I'm going to, use the quick buy option in the future. All those different things are strategies and ideas to help you maintain different levels of focus rather than just focusing on one thing at a time. I hope that makes sense because a lot of the stuff is super wide range and it is complicated, and I find it fascinating, but I know a lot of people don't. So bear with me here. Next one up is going to be the types of focus. These are going to be different areas of focus that may happen and kind of how you break them down. So the first one is going to be the broad attentional focus. This is what allows a person to perceive several occurrences simultaneously. I'm just going to stumble over all those words. So this is very important in sports, and so the athlete needs to be aware of rapidly changing information. And I also put an example here for Dota. So you need to monitor the minimap, you need to monitor your hero, you need to monitor your teammates' positioning, you need to monitor your enemy's positioning, you need to pay attention to what items that you have off cooldown, your abilities that are off cooldown, the items your enemy has, their abilities. All these things are different sources of information that are all coming at you at the same time. They're just bombarding you, just going straight in your mind, and your mind's trying to sort out which of these is more important than the others, and how do we kind of look at all of them at the same time. That is kind of the essential idea behind the broad attentional focus, is because there's just so much stuff. You have to look at it in a very broad view. The other part of this, like on the flip side of this, is going to be the narrow attentional focus, and this is going to be occurring when you respond to not only one or two cues. So the example here is when a golfer lines up to putt. So you're going to be focusing on the ball, the hole, and then you're looking at kind of the lay of the land. That's all you're focusing on. You're not worrying about the crowd. You're not worrying about the wind. You're not worrying about, your partner or whatever it may be. You're focusing on the ball and getting the ball putted correctly. Another hero or another example for Dota is going to be focusing on last hitting. So you're only focused on last hitting. You're not worrying about what the guys do in top lane. You're not worried about what item you're going to buy next. You're not worried, about any of those other situations, because your narrow attentional focus is directly on yourself and that creep you're trying to last hit. Now, the issue is each of these have their place, and you need to recognize when this place is and how you can switch back and forth. So this is where those kind of strategies come in for your mind, and kind of recognizing what breaks your emotions down or breaks down your concentration. Things like pressure, things such as anxiety, all that kind of stuff is going to cause you to concentrate and focus less. So you need to recognize when that's happening, and then start implementing the different strategies that allow you to kind of calm yourself down, refocus, get your mind right, and so you can get back on track and doing what you got to do. Because there is a time and place where you need to focus on getting that last hit, because you want to get as many as you can. But there's also a time and place where you need to be paying really close attention to the mini-map, to the heroes around you, and all that kind of stuff. It's just so much information, and that's what makes Dota so much similar to sports. Like I talked about earlier with football, you have the field, you have to recognize the defense, the players, your players, their players, your positions. You got to know your receivers, you got to know who your blockers are, you got to know, where their guys are, and you got to pay attention to all this information. And meanwhile, you're thinking about plays. You're thinking about your coach getting upset with you. You're thinking about, your teammates not wanting to let them down, the fans. All these different things are all coming in at you at the same time, but you need to focus on the important ones. And so whatever way your mindset is and whatever mental strategies you're employing, then you're going to be able to narrow down getting rid of the things that are important, like the fans. The fans are not important. It doesn't matter what is happening in the game. The fans do not matter. So that's a source of irrelevant information. You need to tune them out. And that is how I go on a tangent and we get way off track. So those are broad attentional focus and narrow attentional focus. The next two are going to be external and internal attentional focus. So external attentional focus is focusing on something outside of you. Internal is focusing on something inside of you. So outside of you, something like having your hands in the right place on the keyboard, making sure you use the right abilities at the right time. Internal attentional focus is going to be inward thoughts and feelings. So such as, if you died, you're going to be thinking about how that happened, how you're going to fix it. That is kind of what the internal thought process is. This is something too where you're looking at replays. You played a game, you watch the replay, and then you need to be focusing on your thoughts and your feelings and kind of understanding what went wrong, why it went wrong, how you can fix it, and attuning to that. Because a lot of times people watch replays or watch others, and they look at it at a very top level. They're going to be looking at a replay going, okay, well, we just lost because this guy was bad and then we picked the wrong hero, so then not worry about it. But really, you want to really focus on yourself and those internal feelings. So things such as, okay, I died here. I didn't die because I got attacked by 3 guys. I died because I thought I was safe. Now, why did I think I was safe? Oh, because our team had no wards up, so I didn't think that the enemy was coming to get me because I couldn't see them. So you're kind of breaking that down into a more internal thought process rather than focusing on, oh, there's 3 guys, they killed me. Your focus is more on understanding what your thought process and your feelings were, because the next time when that situation occurs, you're going to be thinking about your internal processes and think, you know what, I should probably get back. This is an important time for me to play defensively and all that kind of good stuff, because I guess this whole thing boils down to is there's a lot of information going on, and you need to find a way to focus on the important bits and tune out the bits that are not important. So that's where things such as guides in Dota become really useful for new players. It's overwhelming to have to worry about all these different hero abilities and the different items and what they do and team compositions and all this stuff. All this stuff is so massive and so complicated that you get just kind of information overload, and then a lot of times it causes people either to just disregard everything or to quit or to get really upset and blame everybody else. Those are kind of the things that happen when you have too much stuff going on. So these types of focus are really important in kind of understanding what's going on in your head, and then that way when you start applying these strategies and ideas, it'll make a little bit more sense. So next time we're going to be looking at things that distract you, things that interrupt your focus, and also tips on how to improve your focus and concentration. And that is that for today's episode for sake of time. I know today was a lot more theory oriented, and I know a lot of people are going to say, I don't like theory, it's boring. If I wanted theory, I'd read a textbook. That's fine. That's totally relevant. This is more for my own personal thought process as well, because I find this stuff interesting, but I also like to see how we can utilize this information for the book that I'm writing and all that kind of stuff. It helps to get it down, kind of, mull over it and just trying to figure out how this fits in the grand scheme of things. So I feel like if you look at these things, these different types of focus, kind of understanding that there's broad focus and detailed focus, understand that there's things outside of you that you're focusing on and inside of you that you're focusing on. Then when you go look at these strategies and, things such as self-talk, things such as imagery, things such as, arousal regulation, things that we talked about in the anxiety episode, these are things that you can also apply to help your focus. And then all of a sudden you can start realizing where your weaknesses are and then try to fix it from there. So, for an example, you might be somebody who's really good at your broad attentional focus. You might be really good at noticing when people are coming to get you on the minimap and also what the enemy's doing and what items they're buying, all this stuff. But you might be really bad at last hitting because you don't pay attention to it because you're worried about those other things. So hopefully by hearing, this kind of theory, you can apply that thinking to, okay, I need to focus a bit more on my narrow attentional focus and a little bit less on the broad attentional focus, kind of finding that balance and when it is appropriate to switch focuses between broad and narrow. Like I said earlier, I find that stuff just tremendously fascinating because just the way people's brains work and the way we gather information, the way we process information, all that stuff is just super, super interesting. So if you have interest in that, reach out to me and we can talk about it. I'd love to just have debates and discussions on all that kind of stuff. It is really, really interesting. So next week we'll be talking about why we get distracted and then ways we can, ideas that we could do to not get distracted. So next week will be very practical. If you're a person who this was too much theory, lots of practicality next week, and I hope you guys tune back in for that. As always, I will get these updated on the MP3 stream, so if you're a person who prefers the audio version, which in my personal preference, audio versions are always the best version, I will throw them up on iTunes as well as put a link to the download, so if you need that, just let me know. I can get you the download, or if you want the direct file, we can do that as well, whatever works. And that's it. You can follow me on Twitter at IndieFinch, it's IndieFinch. And until next time, we'll be back with part 2 of concentration and focus here on the Dota Clinic. You guys take care and have a great rest of the week.
This is Rags. Some of you cats might also know me as anemic, and I'm about to go in on this thing we call Dota.
The battle begins.
Let's go. I'm the man in Dota 2. We can take it to the scrimmage, and you know that I'll be winning. Just give it 30 minutes. Ganking in the lane. Hey, yo, he's in that gross. I see him trying to kite. Yeah, let's see just how far that goes. I carry in the scoreboard, he's carried in the hearse. Your tier 2 towers and your rats getting murked. Demolish what's in my way from the start to the finish. Like I said in the beginning, I'm the man in Dota scrimmage. I was bossing in Dota 1, now I'm taking it to the sequel. Okay. Demolishing my enemies are feeble. Yeah. This is abolition, there's really no competition. While trekking the expedition, I'm ready to get it kicking. First blood on me, homie, I'm a captain, you're a